Welcome back, everyone. In this one, we are going to go ahead and construct a chart that will represent our expenses in this view. So we are going to be able to see how much we spent on insurance in the last 6 months. So we are going to now visualize this on a chart using Chart.JS. So I'm going to go ahead and show you like how you can use the same data to view different types of charts. For example, now if I click here, this is going to be randomized. So when I click here, this changes. This now we are viewing it on a bar graph. So when I click again, you can see it comes on a line graph. When I click again, you can see this is a pie chart, and now this is called a radar view, and this is a donut. So this is like a pie chart, but then it has a hole inside, so that's why it's called a donut. Anyway, so what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to create an endpoint that will give us data like this. So we're going to have like a key with the type of data we are viewing, and then with the key value inside. So in Python, now we are going to need to like send a dictionary down with key values, and then in JavaScript, we are going to now make an API call to the endpoint we'll make to be able to create what will be the data in a format that can be used with Chart.js. So we create labels from these keys and values from these values, and then we show them on the chart. What's going to be interesting is that we are going to be able to see how to query with time differences. So this is only going to be for the last 6 months. So I'm going to show you the way you can always like make queries between dates. So it's going to be interesting. If you're interested in this kind of content, I highly recommend you subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need to do is set up an endpoint that will give us the data. We'll need an endpoint that will give us data in this format. So with the category, and then the total amount spent on that. Another criteria we need to use is that we shouldn't return a category which doesn't have any records. Okay, so let's do that. Now here in my editor, I'm going to go to our views.py in expenses. So we need to create an endpoint here. So I can set it up here. So I'm going to call it expense summary. Okay, I'm going to call it expense category summary. Alright, so this of course takes in a request, and basically we're going to handle a GET request, but really it doesn't matter. So here now we need to first know the date that it was 6 months ago. Okay, so for us to be able to do that, we are going to need to use datetime. So let me import it here. So import datetime. So this will allow us to work with, this will give us a lot of date utilities to work with dates. So now, right here, first of all, we need to first know what date it is today. So I'm going to set up a variable called today's date. I'm going to go to today's date. So this is going to be datetime dot date dot today. Okay, so this is going to return us today's date. Now for us to know what date it was 6 months ago, we need to use the time delta function. So here I'm going to set up another variable called 6 months ago, and this is now going to equal to today's date. Then I'm going to subtract. So here I'm going to use datetime time delta. So basically what time delta does is it takes in the days. So for us to be able to know how many days it was in the past 6 months, basically we already know that 1 month have 30 days. So we can do like days equals 30 times 6. So that's 180. But so you can pass in 180 or you can pass in that. Okay, so that will give us basically the difference between these. So we will later print this just so we can see that it's correct. So now that we have that, we need to query for the user's expenses in this period. All right, so from today to 6 months ago. So for us to be able to do that, I'm going to set up another variable called expenses. So this is going to be, we're going to use the expense model, and then we are going to query so objects filter, and now we want to filter by these two. So first of all, we want to filter by the date that's greater or equal to the date 6 months ago. So we can do that by doing date underscore underscore GTE, then equals 6 months ago, and then of course the range should be until today. So here I'm going to put a comma, and then we also want to filter by the date that is not the date that is not greater than the date today. So here we can do date LTE, and then this is going to be today's date. All right, so basically this is going to return us the expenses that fall into the period between these two. All right, so now that we have that, what we need to do is try to see how we can construct our final representation of the data. So if you look at this here, we basically need to have a key and a value. So the key is going to be a dynamic category from a database, and then the value will be computed for that key itself. So now for us to be able to do that, I'm going to set up a variable here. Just let me say final rep. That will be like the final representation. So since this is going to be like a key value, so this is going to be a dictionary. So I'm going to set up an empty dictionary here. Now we are going to manipulate it with the data, as we are going to see. Okay, so the first thing we are going to need to do is get all the categories that exist in a database. To be able to do that, I'm first going to set up a function here. This is going to be a helper function. So def. So what this is going to be doing, basically it will take in an expense and then return for us the category for that expense. So I'm going to call it get category, and then it takes an expense, and then what it does, it returns expense dot category. All right, so now that we have this function, we are going to need to call it for every expense that we get. So down here, I'm going to set up a category list, So here I'm going to use a function, I'm going to use a map function. So I'm going to add map. So for each of the items, so for each of the expenses, we want to call this function. So the way map works is you're going to need to give it a function. So this would be get category, and then basically you give it an iterable. So now we can give it our expenses. All right, so what it will do is it's going to be calling this function for every item in here. So for us to get access to the values that the map returns, basically that will be, of course, it's going to return like a list that will contain the categories for each of these. So if you think of it, that will most of the times return more than one, because some categories might be having some expenses might be having a same category. So that will return like duplicates for us. So for us to get the values, here I'm going to wrap this in a set. So set. And what this will do now is it's going to remove all the duplicates. All right, so that would mean that we get the categories that are not repeated. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it into a list just so we can easily work with it. So wrap everything in a list. All right, so that will give us a categories list with no duplicates. Since we already know that the categories will not be duplicated, we are going to loop through the expenses and then use the category of that expense, use it as a key in our final representation here. So let me show you how that would be. So here we can do I'm going to use X in expenses, and then in here I'm going to nest this for loop. So now we need to loop the expenses for as many times as we have for the categories. So I'm going to add another for here. So for Y in categories list. Okay, so now for each of these, we basically want to update our final representation with the category. So here we can do that, and then we can pass in our key, which now will be something like travel. And now we need to get the value for the travel. So here I'm going to set an equals. So now to get the value for the travel, I'm going to set up another function. I'm going to call it the get. I'm going to call it expense category amount. Category amount. Okay. So this is going to take in a categories list, a category. So this is going to take in like Y here. So we need to create it. So it's going to be def that it takes in a category, and then it should return for us an amount. So we can do amount, we can set it to 0 at first, and then we want to return amount. Okay, but of course we want to stop it at 0, but we will now work on updating it. All right, so here basically what we want to do first is filter the expenses for this category, so we remain with only the expenses that belong to this category. So for us to do that, we can do like filtered by category. This will be expenses. Since it's a query set, we can actually run another filter on it and then pass category. So this is the name of our attribute on the model. So this is going to be equal to category that gets passed in here. All right. So now this is going to return for us all expenses that belong to this category that we pass in. So now basically what we want to do is sum up all the amount of money for each of those items. Okay. So for us to do that, we have defined our amount to be 0 at first. So here I'm going to run a for loop. So I'm going to do like for item in filtered by category. Okay, so what we want to do is for each of these amounts, we want to be able to add to this 0 here. So now we can do amount plus equals. So this is going to be equal to item.amount. All right. So what this will do is update this 0 for each of the amounts on these categories, and then we return the amount in the end. Okay, so looks good. Looks like we are doing good. So now what we want to do is be able to. So now, if you look at this, we have our final declaration of what we want. So right here, we set a key, and then we set a value. So this should be able to give us some results here. So now we need to return this to the user. So the way we do that, we have already imported JSON response, I believe. Not really. So we need to send it as JSON. Oh, we have actually imported it. So we need to send it back as JSON on the network, just so a user can access it from the client APIs. Okay, so here we can do return JSON response. So this now takes in the data. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to set a key. So I'm going to set something like expense category data, and then this is going to be our final representation. All right, like we already know, this is going to be a list. So for us to be able to serialize it, we need to set safe equals false here. So safe equals false. All right, so that should do for the endpoint. Let's register it in our URLs, and of course there might be some problems here, but we'll get to that. All right, so the first problem that I noticed now is when we query here, we basically are querying all expenses in the DB, and we don't want a user to view or even the expenses for the other people. So we also need to query by the owner. So the owner should be request.user. So that this will guarantee that the user gets only what belongs to them. All right. So now we need to register this in our URLs. So here, path. So path here is going to be, let's say, expense category summary. That's fine. So it's going to go to views.expense category summary. Fine. Then of course we can set the name. to that, add a comma here. So that should do. So now we need to go to our front end and set up the chart. So in our templates, so let's see. So right here, we need a user. When the user clicks on expenses, we want to be able to take them somewhere. So we need to hook up this. So here in our templates, if you go to our base, and then if you go to our partials, then sidebar, so this should be here. So here we need to set up a link to another page. So I'm going to create another view actually. This is going to be URL, and then I'm going to call that view stats. So let's set up the view real quick. But for now, I want to first set up a template that will show the charts. So here, I'm going to add another one. So I'm going to call it stats.html. And then I'm going to bring in all this here. Then I'm going to remove the things that I don't need. So for the most part, we don't need all this. Let me clean this one up. Don't need the table stuff. Don't need all this stuff. Okay. Don't need you. All right. Okay, so let's keep the breadcrumb. So this can be say like summary. Then we don't need this for now. Let me clear it up. Then this can be summary. Okay, so it can be expense summary. We'll look at it later and see how to best format it. But for now, we don't need this. We can call it this something like back, so we can provide a back navigation. So this script is going somewhere. I'm going to comment it out for now. Alright, so now we need to create a view that will render this page. So here, in our expenses, I'm going to set up another view. It can go anywhere. So def stats view, just text in request. Okay, so stats view, text in request, and then what it will do is return render. So we are rendering, of course we pass request, and then we are rendering the expenses slash stats.html. Alright, so once we have this, we need to hook up the URL. So here, I'm gonna copy all this, bring it here, put a comma, then I'll replace this with stats. Okay, so that should do. So since the name is stats here, we want to verify that in our partial sidebar, we are actually going to stats, which we are doing. So let's save this. Okay, so this is not finding it. Views.stats, stats view. Cool. So once we save that, the server should be able to restart. If I go back, you see it comes now. When I click on expenses summary, I come here on stats. Makes sense. Good. So now we need to set up our Chart.js. So to start, right here is the Chart.js website. So when you come ChartJS.org, you'll be able to see the samples, you see the GitHub, and then I'm going to go to the get started. So right here is their documentation. You can always take time to come over here and explore what's possible. But for now, to get started, we need the CDN link. Let's see. So to get started, if you click on the installation page, let me open it here. You can see that you can install it with npm, depending on where you want to use it, but we'll go the easier route and use the CDN. So we'll do the CDN, and if I remember very well, we should have set it up already. So if you come back to our base.html, which is, where is it? Which is here. Okay, so down here, you notice that we are already bringing in Chart.js. Okay, so we already have the CDN link, and we'll stick to using that. But now what I want us to do is get something to start with, and I will explain like how everything comes together. So here they have an example. I'm gonna copy this example and then I'll go over it. So I'm gonna copy everything, and then in our stats.html we need to link to a JavaScript file. So let me uncomment this. Okay, remove the end comments. Okay, so this is gonna be called, I'm gonna call it stats.js. So here I'm going to bring in all this, but then I want to remove everything in the JS just so we can stay with only the HTML. So cut this one out, everything in the script. So cut all this up to here. So now we are remaining with the canvas. So this canvas element has an ID of my chart. Okay, and this is where the chart will basically display on the canvas. So let's create the file JS stats.js. So that should be in our main app, main project app, main project folder, then JS. So I'm gonna create a file called stats.js. So right here, I'm gonna bring in everything in the JS. Then I'm going to clean it up. Okay, so clean up everything. All right, so right now, with what we have, if we go back to the site, it should be here, and then reload, we need to put up the DevTools just so we can work with it, because this is a lot of JS. And first thing that we see first here, you see we get chart is not defined, and that could be because our main chart.js is not being loaded. So let's take a look. Base HTML, chart.js should be here. Okay, so I'm gonna try bring it up. So I'm gonna cut it out from here and then bring it in the head, bring it here. So let's try again. All right, so when we reload, you can see that we can see the chart. Okay, so this is good. Now that we have this chart, now we can use it as a wrapper to build on. But if we look at what it has basically is it selects the canvas element from the DOM, and then we create a new chart.js instance, and then basically it takes in a bunch of options. So this, you can specify a type, and the types can be different. So basically we can specify like pie charts, we can specify like donut, line chart. So you can specify the type, and now here on the labels, basically we want to use these labels from our server as category labels, and then these colors, of course, you can always change them. And then on the options, so you can see that right now on the y-axis we are allowing to showing for ticks, which is here, but I'm going to actually go ahead and remove these scales, but you guys can look at the documentation of what's possible here. But what I want to show you is how to add a title to this. So I'm going to add options title, and then here you can do display, this can be true, and then add a text. So text can be, so since we are going to be working with categories, so we can say expenses per category. Right, so if we reload, you should be able to see that now we have basically a title. We change it to be a donut, and now you can say this is a donut. But what we want to do now basically is be able to use the data of our own. Okay, but if you look at this is going to be dynamic. So right here, I'm actually going to cut this one, and then I'm going to set it to, let's see, to labels. Okay, then when it comes to the data sets, basically you can pass in a label for a data set, and this can be different. So for now, since we are working with one set of data and we are drawing one line charts, bar charts, so let's say you want to compare like expenses and income. So you have like two data sets for expense and for income. You're going to have an array with each configuration for each of that data. But for now, we are going to be working with one, so this is fine. But let me change this to be last 6 months expenses. All right, so let me remove that. So when it comes to the colors, for now this is fine. So what we need to change is also the data. This is going to be dynamic, so we can add data here. And now when it comes to these values, I'm going to create a function that will be rendering this chart. So let me create it here. So const render chart. So this is going to be taking in the data and then the labels. Okay, so let me make them like that. So what it's gonna do now is basically do this, cut everything and then bring them here. Okay, so now we need to find a way of rendering this, of calling this function. So for us to be able to call it, so down here I'm going to add a listener for when the window has loaded. So here we can do document for when the document has loaded. So document dot onload. So this is going to be equal to a function, and this is going to be called get chart data. All right. So now what chart data is going to do, I think I can even put it here. We'll make an API call, return for us the data, and then render the chart. Okay, so for us to make an API call, we use fetch, which is a built-in API in JS. So fetch takes in basically the URL, and since we are making a GET request for now, we only need to pass a URL. So the way we get our URL is, let's look at our urls.py, which should be here. And since we already know that our application, basically our expenses app lies in the main default domain, so we don't need to do like expenses. We don't need to do this slash. So what we're gonna do is only call this endpoint here. Okay, so here we pass the endpoint, and then we do then, and then fetch returns two promises. So the first one we're going to map it to JSON, and then the second then this now returns for us the data. All right, so now this is the point we've been waiting for. Now we can now test out what is contained in this data. So here I'm going to do like data. Okay, we are going to console log it just so we see what you're working with. But I want to actually rename this because we are going to be using the keyword data a lot. So I'm going to call it results. So down here, we need to call this function to render the chart. Okay. So here, I'm gonna do render chart, and now I'm gonna pass it two arrays. So one is gonna be an empty array, and another is gonna be an empty array. Just for now, just so we can have a way of testing this. Okay. So going back to the browser, let's reload. So now you see we get nothing. Okay, so let's try to inspect what's happening. So what we expect is the document gets loaded, and then we call this get chart data, and then it should be able to run this, which I think we need a slash. Let's see. Let's reload. Okay. Yeah, let me actually add console log to something like fetching. All right, so let's reload it. So see, we don't get our fetching, so meaning we need to investigate why. Oh, we need to call this, so we need to execute this function here. So if we come back and reload, you can see that we get fetching, and then you can see we get an expected error. So let's investigate where this is coming from, and this is mostly coming in from our from our server. So let's take a look. So this is saying, whoa. So this is saying cannot resolve date LTE. So let's see how we wrote this in our views.py. Okay, so this should be 2 underscores. Sorry. Okay, so once we save, the server restarts. Let's try again. Now you can see we get results, and inside results we have expense category, and in here we have the key value pairs. So this is good. This is what we want. All right. This is really good. So if you come back here, let's say we want to add another one. So let's say we come and delete this one. So now we have 2 remaining. So if we come back to the summary, in the results we should get 2 or 1. Sorry. So yeah, so it's working. So now we have 2. Let's go ahead and create one with one expense with for rent and see how that will be. So if we come back here, let's create one for rent. This is, let's say it's 1,000 love you bro. Then rent, let's increase this to here, and then I'm gonna give an extravagant value, which I don't know if this will be accepted. So let me give this big value. So save it. So if we come back, so rent should have increased a lot, so which it has. So meaning the data is correct. Now we need to send this data to basically our function that renders the chart. All right, so here in our JS, which should be here, instead of sending an empty list, we need to be able to send the key values. Okay, so for now to be able, so now if you look at this, let me actually bring it here a lot so we can take a look. So what we have is an object with a key as expense category data, and then it also has values. So which of the values now, they are also objects. So each of them is an object with a key. So we also need to be able to get these values separately. Okay, so let me copy this here. So now here we can do, let's say const category data. This is going to be equal to results dot expense category data. So now this basically gives us our, this will give us our rent, the value, travel, the value. So for us to be able to now get the labels, basically the labels will be all the keys, and then the values will be the data. All right, so now for us to be able to get that, I'm going to do some array destructuring here. So this is going to be, so here I'm going to call it data and then labels. So this is going to equal to this here. So here this is going to be object dot keys of what? Of category data. Then I'm going to put a comma. So we're going to do the same thing for the values. So it's going to be object with values, and then still the values of the category data. So now we need to, actually I need to swap this. It's going to be labels, because labels are the keys, and then the data are the values. Okay, so now we can now return, if you look at our function, text in data and then labels. So now we can now here return data and then labels. All right, so once you save that, come back and reload. All right, so you see we have our chart. Now you can see that here we have a title, and then we have we basically have our representation. So when you hover above one, when you hover above one, you can see we get this tooltip that shows us like how much for that. All right, so yeah, so let's create another one just to test with another type. So for now, you see we get only unique categories. So let's test for, let's actually add like family. Let's pay 300K. Well, so let's say, yeah, we are just giving away money. Okay, so save. That creates the expense. If we come back here, you can see that now we have another category. Yeah, so which is good, which is all awesome. So I'm going to leave the link to the Chart.JS documentation so you guys can go explore. So I hope this gave you an insight on how you can go on integrating charts in your Django app or even another type of app. So I hope this helped you out. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe.